Every single glass of wine on earth, whether it's a $3 bottle from a supermarket shelf or a $30,000 bottle pulled from a climate-controlled cellar that hasn't been touched in 50 years, starts the exact same way. A grape, crushed, fermented, and left to transform. That's it. No secret formula, no ancient mystery. And yet, from that one brutally simple act, humans have produced one of the most complex, debated, and emotionally loaded beverages in history. Wine has funded cathedrals, shaped entire economies, and generated more snobbery per square inch than almost any other product on Earth. It is also, at its core, just fermented fruit juice. This is the story of every major wine style in the world, how they were born, why they taste the way they do, and the strange history hiding behind every bottle. Red wine gets its color not from the juice of red grapes, which is almost always clear regardless of the variety, but from the grape skins, which are left in contact with the fermenting juice for days or weeks, bleeding their pigments and tannins into the liquid. Those tannins are the key difference between red and white wine, creating that drying, slightly grippy sensation in your mouth that comes from tannin molecules binding with proteins in your saliva. The history of red wine stretches back at least 8,000 years to the region now known as Georgia in the Caucasus, where archaeologists have found clay vessels with wine residue dating to around 6000 BC. Ancient Rome spread grapevine cultivation across France, Spain, Germany, and Portugal during its expansion, which is why those countries are still the heartland of wine culture today. The most celebrated and expensive bottles in the world are almost always reds, with top Bordeaux and Burgundy estates producing wines that can age for a century and sell at auction for prices that have nothing to do with what's reasonable and everything to do with scarcity and obsession. White wine is made by pressing grapes and fermenting only the juice without skin contact, which is why it stays pale and has almost no tannins, producing that clean, crisp, lighter mouthfeel most people associate with it. The flavor range is enormous, from the razor-sharp acidity of an unoaked Chablis to the fat, buttery richness of a heavily oaked California Chardonnay. And those two bottles are so different that it's almost hard to believe they belong to the same category. White wine generally ages less well than red wine since tannins help reds develop complexity over decades, though certain full-bodied whites like top white Burgundy are remarkable exceptions capable of evolving beautifully for 20 or 30 years. Climate change has begun threatening white wine production across Europe, pushing harvest dates earlier and raising alcohol levels, while in some historically ideal regions, beginning to compromise the natural acidity that makes great white wine possible in the first place. Rosé is made by allowing just a few hours of skin contact between red grape skins and fermenting juice rather than the days or weeks used for full red wine, which gives it that signature pink color sitting somewhere between pale salmon and deeper copper. Despite its reputation as a frivolous summer drink in some markets, Rosé actually has one of the longest histories in wine. Since ancient Greeks and Romans favored lighter, pinkish styles far more than the deeply extracted reds we associate with those civilizations, meaning rose may be closer to what ancient people actually drank than any modern red. Provence in southern France has built an entire regional identity around dry, pale rose, and the explosion of celebrity-branded Provence Ross in the 2010s turned what was a serious regional specialty into a global lifestyle product almost overnight. The style also includes the noticeably sweet white Zinfandel that dominated American supermarket shelves for decades. A wine so different from dry Provençal rose that they barely seem to be playing the same game, yet both technically belong to the same broad category. Champagne can only legally carry that name if it comes from the Champagne region of northeastern France, made using a method where the wine undergoes a second fermentation inside the bottle itself to create bubbles, after which it must be aged on dead yeast cells for at least 15 months, a process that gives it the signature toasty, biscuity, brioche-like character that separates it from cheaper sparkling wines. The discovery of deliberate bubbles is traditionally credited to the 17th century monk Dom Prignon, though historians now believe English scientists likely got there first. And Prignon's real contribution was probably improving the clarity of the wine rather than inventing the fizz. Champagne's association with luxury and celebration was partly deliberately manufactured through brilliant 18th and 19th century marketing, when houses cultivated relationships with European royalty and made the wine synonymous with wealth in a way that became completely self-reinforcing. Non-vintage champagne blends wines from multiple years to maintain a consistent house style, which is an extraordinary feat of blending that often goes underappreciated, while vintage champagne from exceptional years like 2008 can age for 30 to 50 years and evolve into something almost incomprehensibly complex. Cabernet Sauvignon is the most planted wine grape variety on Earth, found in virtually every major wine country on every inhabited continent, producing some of the world's most structured, age-worthy, and collectible reds, as well as some of the most reliable everyday bottles on any supermarket shelf. It is a naturally occurring cross between Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc that most likely happened by accident in the vineyards of Bordeaux sometime in the 17th century. Its signature flavors include black currant, black cherry, and cassis when young, evolving over decades into cedar, tobacco, and graphite, with the specific expression varying enormously between the cool elegance of Bordeaux and the warm, ripe richness of Napa Valley. The great classified Chateaux of Bordeaux's left bank, estates like Chateau Latour and Chateau Margaux, are built around Cabernet Sauvignon, and their top vintages represent some of the most expensive bottles at auction in the entire world of wine, purchased by collectors who will never open them. Pinot Noir is widely considered the most difficult major grape to grow and the most transparent in expressing the specific place it came from, meaning the same grape planted in Burgundy, Oregon. And New Zealand produces wines so different they barely seem related despite sharing identical genetics. The grape has thin skins, tight clusters, and a tendency to rot in wet conditions, making it enormously challenging, and it requires extremely precise winemaking to coax out its subtle complexity without overwhelming it. Burgundy in France is its spiritual home, with individual vineyard sites mapped out by Cistercian monks over centuries, and a bottle of Romain Conti from the region's most revered estate regularly sells at auction for tens of thousands of dollars from a vineyard barely larger than a city block. Oregon's Willamette Valley has spent 4 decades building a serious reputation for the grape, while New Zealand's Central Otago, one of the world's most southerly wine regions, has created wines of remarkable power and character that owe nothing to either Burgundy or Oregon and are entirely their own thing. Chardonnay is simultaneously the world's most beloved and most hated white grape, the variety behind the greatest white wines ever made, and also behind the avalanche of aggressively oaked, heavily manipulated bottles that triggered an entire backlash movement in the 1990s, where people wore buttons announcing they refused to drink it. The ABC movement, anything but Chardonnay, pushed consumers towards Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio, but it was a reaction to a specific style of Chardonnay rather than the grape itself, since the unoaked Chablis version from northern Burgundy tastes nothing like the buttery California style that was generating the outrage. Chardonnay is extraordinarily adaptable, producing great wine in cool climates like Chablis and Champagne, moderate climates like Burgundy's Thé de Beaune, and warm climates like California and Australia, adjusting its expression to local conditions in ways few other grapes can match. The best white Burgundy, from villages like Meursault and Puligny-Montrachet, remains the global reference point for fine white wine, combining mineral tension, textural richness, and the ability to age for 20 or 30 years in a way that still genuinely astonishes experienced tasters. Sauvignon Blanc is one of the most instantly recognizable grapes in the world, defined by an aggressively aromatic profile that can include cut grass, grapefruit, passion fruit, and a pungent, herbaceous quality that sounds off-putting in description, but is caused by the same sulfur compounds that make the grape so vivid and alive in the glass. France's Loire Valley, specifically Sancerre and Pouilly-Fume, is the original fine wine benchmark, producing wines of extraordinary mineral precision from the region's limestone soils. New Zealand's Marlborough region transformed the grape's global reputation almost single-handedly starting in the 1980s, producing wines of explosive tropical character that were unlike anything the world had seen from any other Sauvignon Blanc region, and Marlborough became one of the most commercially successful white wine styles on the planet within a remarkably short window of time. Unlike Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc is generally not aged in oak because that process mutes the vivid aromatics that are the grape's defining characteristic and the main reason people fall in love with it. Port is a fortified wine from Portugal's Douro Valley, made by adding a neutral grape spirit during fermentation before all the sugars convert to alcohol, which stops the fermentation and preserves natural sweetness while pushing the alcohol to around 20%. Creating a wine that is rich, sweet, complex, and capable of virtually indefinite aging. The practice was reportedly developed by British wine merchants in the 17th and 18th centuries, who needed to preserve Portuguese wine long enough to survive the sea voyage to England, which is why several of the oldest and most prestigious port houses still carry English family names. Vintage port, declared only in exceptional years and aged for decades in the bottle, can develop extraordinary complexity over 50 or even 100 years, evolving so far beyond sweet dessert wine that comparing it to a cheap ruby port is like comparing an aged cognac to a cheap fruit brandy. Tawny port takes a completely different path, aged in small wooden barrels for years or decades where slow oxidation turns it amber and develops complex nutty and dried fruit flavors that make it one of the most underrated styles in the entire world of wine. Natural wine and orange wine natural wine is less a legal category and more a philosophy, built around organic or biodynamic farming, wild yeast fermentation instead of commercial lab yeasts, and minimal or no sulfur additions as a preservative, born from a reaction against the industrialization of wine, and the belief that technology was being used to produce consistent but characterless bottles at the expense of genuine expression. Orange wine, made from white grapes fermented with extended skin contact for weeks or months the way red wine is made, is actually thousands of years old, with Georgia in the Caucasus fermenting white grapes on their skins in buried clay vessels 6,000 years ago, making the natural wine movement's recent rediscovery of the technique a return to one of humanity's oldest winemaking traditions. Both styles generate fierce debate, with enthusiasts arguing the wines are more honest and alive, and critics arguing that selling fault-prone wine at premium prices under an ideological label is sophisticated marketing dressed up as ethics. Both have nonetheless been enormously influential, pushing conventional winemakers to rethink their use of additives and creating an entirely new market segment among younger drinkers who had never found conventional wine particularly interesting before. World wine beyond Europe's traditional heartlands, an entire new world of wine has developed with enough ambition to challenge the old hierarchies at almost every level. California announced itself definitively at the Judgment of Paris in 1976, when Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay beat the top French entries in a blind tasting by French judges. A result so shocking that one judge tried to take her ballot back. Argentina built a wine identity around Malbec, a grape that was a minor blending variety in its native Bordeaux before high-altitude Mendoza revealed depths of color and complexity the grape had never shown in France. South Africa's Cape winelands bring 3.5 centuries of history and a unique earthy, herbal character from some of Africa's most extraordinary mountain landscapes. And serious wine is now being produced in England, China, India, Georgia, Lebanon, and parts of Scandinavia, in countries with little historical connection to winemaking at all. What started as the product of a handful of European countries has become one of the most genuinely global agricultural and cultural phenomena on the planet, still being shaped, still being argued over, still capable of producing something from one piece of ground that no other place on Earth can replicate.